Good afternoon, pilot teachers, and good afternoon, students. Okay, thank you. Sit down. Today we'll continue on with our work on climate, and then after or towards the end of the lesson, I'm going to actually give you the major assignment for you to actually work on. But before we move on to looking at natural vegetation, which is part of the topic on climate, we'll need to complete what we have started on, and that is looking at location and characteristics of some of the major climatic types. We have already studied and looked at the tropical climates. We discovered there are 5 examples or subdivisions of tropical climates. We have already looked at the 5 examples of temperate climates, and our lesson today will see us look at examples of polar climates. And for the polar climates, there are 3 examples or 3 subdivisions that I'd like us to recognize and to make note of. So looking at the polar climates, the 3 polar climates that we are going to actually touch on today will be the subarctic polar climates, the Arctic or the tundra climate, and the third one will be ice cap. Let's look at each one of them and see if we are able to recognize the characteristics and also some of the important features of those 3 different climates. The introduction then to the work on polar climates from the monitor, it reads, polar climates are of course found in the high latitudes of the world. Tropical climates are found in the low latitudes of the world. Polar climates are found in the high latitudes. Since the sun is at a very low angle, with nights that are very long in winter, quantities of solar radiation are small, and therefore all of these climates tend to be cold or very cold. When we were looking at the temperate climates, remember, it was cool to cold. Here we are looking at cold to very cold climates for the polar type regions or polar environments. These regions, the polar regions, they rarely experience heat, and although there may be a marked warmer season, they can be thought of as climates without summer. We cannot say that those areas never get any heat from the sun. They do, but the heat from the sun is not as intense compared to that at the equatorial region and the temperate latitudes. Because they are further away from the equator, the sun's or the angle of the sun is greater, therefore resulting in not as much heat reaching those areas in comparison. Okay, again, there is really no need for you to make note of every single word there. Just pick up the main points because the information will be summarized and you will copy the summary later. Some more important information about the subarctic or the cold temperate climate. These climates are mainly found in the continents of North America and Eurasia. From what we have studied already on temperate climates also, we have found that the North American continent and the Eurasian continent is a very big landmass area. Therefore, they experience different types of temperate climates. Similarly, when we look at the subarctic or the cold temperate climate, it is found also in the continents of North America and Eurasia. This climate or climatic type, they run in diagonal belts across both of these continents from 60 degrees to 70 degrees north on the west coast and about 50 degrees to 60 degrees north on the east coast. Maybe you're wondering, why is it that on the west coast, it runs from about 60 to 70 degrees and on the east coast from 50 to 60? What do you think would be one of those influences that might contribute to the variation in the latitudes as shown on the monitor? What could be an influencing factor? We are looking at the climates which run from 60 to 70 north on the west coast and 50 to 60 north on the east coast. So why the variation? Why couldn't both of them just be 60 to 70 or 50 to 60? We can make reference back to what we have covered on factors which contribute to variation in temperatures. And what could be a factor that may contribute to why the latitude is higher in the or on the west coast, but lower in the east coast. Any ideas on what could be a contributing factor? Okay, if you're still thinking about it, then it's to do with ocean currents. If you look at the east coast of those climates, the ocean currents, the warm ocean currents coming from the equator up towards, the west coast of those climatic type, we have the warm ocean currents which are coming from the equator, and because they are coming from the equator and extending further to the north, they are cooling down the areas which are about 50 to 60. Meanwhile, on the east coast of those continents, then you tend to find that the cold ocean currents that are coming from the polar region down towards the equator. And because they are coming from the poles down towards the equator on the east coast, they are bringing with it a lot of cool temperatures, resulting in the temperatures being lower. And therefore, that particular area, in terms of its latitude, it extends a little bit more closer or away from the equator. Let's look at the map of the world showing some of the areas that has this type of climate, and also we can make reference to the work on ocean currents. Okay, looking at some of the areas of the world that experiences the subarctic or cold temperate climate. We have in North America, all of that area, and then running from the west all the way to the east, but within those latitudes 50 to 60 and 60 to 70. And you also note that this climatic type is mainly confined to the northern hemisphere and confined to those 2 or 3 continents, the North American continent and the Asia and Europe continent. Okay, looking at the ocean currents. The ocean currents, the warm ocean current, which is the North Equatorial Drift, the Kurosuo, would actually hit up the adjacent land, meaning that the areas to the coastline of those areas will be warmer. Therefore, the extent in terms of latitude would be about 60 to 70. We come on this side here. It is the cold currents coming from the poles down towards the equator, bringing in a lot of cool air, resulting in these areas here a little bit more cooler. We come to this side also, you can see the cold currents coming in from this area, the Labrador current coming in from this section here. Therefore, the cold current is actually forcing or pushing the temperatures to be lower. Therefore, this area is extending, the cool area extending closer towards the equator. So the ocean currents definitely has an influence also in the difference in latitude of those 2 areas. Let's move on to some more important information about this type of climate. The most significant feature of this type of climate, which is the subarctic or cold temperate climate, is its long and very cold winter. In most areas, 6 months or more in the year have an average temperature below freezing So if average temperature is below freezing, that means it is below 0 degrees Celsius. So for most of the year, 6 months or more, temperatures are definitely below 0 degrees. We note also that because it is very cold, precipitation in this area is low and evaporation is also low. And those are some of the significant features or information about this type of climate. Okay, let's look at the summary of this type of climate before we look at the climograph. Okay, the summary then of this type of climate, the subarctic or the cold temperate. Temperature, it is warm in summer, winter, very cold. Precipitation, low or less than 500 millimeters per annum or per year. In terms of rainfall in the different seasons, in all seasons, the rainfall is low right throughout. The main controls that also has to be mentioned about this type of climate is the fact that the air is mainly the dry polar continental air masses, which does influence the precipitation and also temperature in that area. Okay, I'll give you at least 5 minutes then to make note of the summary for the subarctic climate. That's done. All the others? Maybe.
Just not taking.
Okay. You all made note of that information? Okay, we move on then. The second of the polar climates, this time we're moving to the Arctic or the tundra type climate. But before we do that, let's look at a sample of the climograph for Churchill, Canada. Remember we mentioned, or it was said that this type of climate has 6 or more months of the year where temperatures are below freezing. So we have the 0 degrees Celsius here. You can see the dots there that represents the temperature, average temperature for the months of the year. And here we can see that there is only 1, 2, 3, 4 months of the year where temperatures are above 0. The rest of the months, temperatures are below freezing. And this is a sample of the climograph of an area that has the subarctic or the cold temperate type climate. You can see also rainfall is actually low or very low right throughout the year. Okay, we move on to the next climatic type now, and this time we're looking at the Arctic or the tundra type climate. For the introduction to the Arctic or the tundra type climate, it is stated that this is the climate which actually lies along the north coast of North America and Eurasia, but bordering the Arctic Sea. Here, the average temperature is very low. Summers are cool and very short. with winters that are long and very cold. Daylight may last as long as 3 months in summer, but the sun may not shine at all for several months in winter. Because of the cold, precipitation in this area is very low, but so is evaporation. The cold polar air masses, they prevail in this particular climatic type or climatic environment. Okay, we'll move on. Here are some locations of areas which experiences the Arctic or the tundra type climate. So if we have to look at noting some of those areas, then you should be able to list the following. You again have North America and also Eurasian areas which are bordering the Arctic Sea. So you have the Arctic Sea, and the areas bordering them would be those that experience the tundra type climate. You also have this island here, which is Greenland, the coastal area of the island, Greenland, and also the many islands which are close to and within the Arctic Circle. They are also those islands that experience the tundra type or the Arctic type climate. You also have some islands to the north of the Canadian mainland. So the Canadian mainland, the north of it, there are some islands also which experience this type of climate. Let's look at the summary for this type of climate. For the Arctic or the tundra type climate, the temperature in summer is cool, in winter very cold. Precipitation is low, less than 500 millimeters per year. And precipitation is also low in all the seasons. Again, a main control of the Arctic or the tundra climate would be the dry polar air masses. Okay, all made note of that information. Okay, now let's look at a sample of a climograph for this particular region. You can see there that the climograph is very similar to that of the subarctic climograph. Again, few months of the year where temperatures are above 0 degrees. The rest of the year temperatures are below freezing. You can have the 0 there to represent those temperatures above freezing and those that are below freezing point. For the case of the example, we have about 3 months of the year where temperatures are above 0. The rest of the months, temperatures below 0. Okay, this is a sample of a climograph for the Arctic or the tundra type climate for Point Barrow in Alaska. Any questions so far? No questions? Okay, finally, let's look at the last of the examples of the polar climate, and that is the one for ice cap. I think the word speaks for itself. When we talk about ice cap, we're looking at perhaps an area which is covered in snow and ice all year round. Okay, now to the third and the final type climate. And that will also conclude the activities that we have been doing in terms of recognizing the different climatic types, location, and characteristics. And that is on the ice cap climate. The polar ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica and the floating ice areas of the Arctic Sea are the coldest parts of the world. Even the average temperature of the warmest month is below freezing. So if we're looking at the warmest month, perhaps the average might be at -3 or -4 or -10. The warmest month, the average will not be usually above freezing. It is always below freezing. Coastal areas are generally warmer than inland areas in winter. And when I'm making reference to warmer, I am not saying that it is 10, 20, or 30 degrees. No. I'm making reference to perhaps the coastal areas within the regions that experience the ice cap type climate could be -5 to -10 degrees Celsius. The areas which are further inland that are also of the type of climate may be -25 to -50 degrees Celsius in winter. So the coastal areas generally might be a little bit more warmer than those areas that are inland. And because we are making reference to the polar or ice caps of the following regions, Greenland and Antarctica, and the floating ice areas of the Arctic Sea, those regions you should be able to identify or pick up. I do not have a map of the world to actually show you those areas, but the names should be able to help you locate and identify those places. Some more information on the ice cap type climate. Note that the South Pole experiences the Earth's coldest temperatures because it lies in the middle of a huge continent and also at a high level above sea level, about 2,800 meters. That's the height of the coldest point in the southern hemisphere or in the South Pole. And this area also receives the minimum amount of solar radiation. There is very little precipitation at all, and it always occurs, if there is precipitation, it occurs as snow and would be equal to rainfall less than 120 millimeters per year. So very little rainfall or precipitation. And if precipitation does occur, it will always occur as snow and not water falling. So the coldest temperatures that are experienced would be in the South Pole. The reason why it is in the South Pole is because of the following. Number one, this area in the South Pole lies in the middle of a huge continent, Antarctica we are looking at here. Number two, this particular area is at a height of about 2,800 meters above sea level. So distance from the sea plus the height above sea level makes this particular area, the South Pole, the coldest in comparison. Okay, finally, looking at the summary then of this particular type of climate, which is the ice cap type climate. And the summary would be, in summer, the temperatures are cold. In winter, very cold. Precipitation is low, less than 250 millimeters per year. Very low precipitation in all seasons. And note also the control, or the controls would be the polar high pressure system. The polar high pressure system, which is there created as a result of very cold temperatures. And that would be the main control then for this type of climate. I'll give you time then to make note of the summary. All made note of the summary? Okay, note that the climograph for the ice cap climate types would be very similar to that for the Arctic tundra and the subarctic type climographs that we have studied or looked at. Okay, with that information, that will also bring us to the end of our lesson. What I'd like you to do so that you get yourselves familiar again with the characteristics and location of this climate, or the climatic types that we have studied, is I'd like you to go back and you read what you have actually copied and recorded. And if you do have any questions with regards to any of those climatic types that we have looked at in our lesson, bring your questions with you to the class in our next lesson. Okay, with that information, class, if you can stand up now. Okay, to the pilot teachers, our keyword for lesson 130 is subpolar. Good afternoon and thank you, students.
Good afternoon, students.